On the very first disc of all of the Feigl pictures, they're all in folders. So I just, in the first probably 10 folders, I found some pictures. So I'm just, for instance, and this is appropriate, I'm just going to put it on the screen. Does anybody remember any of these people? I can tell you right now it's the City Council group picture from May 7th, 1973.
Okay,
And
I do see, this is John Demery, I do see Duke Seal, I do see Stephen Granite, and that's the two I recognize. Oh, and Elmer Feigl. The other ones I do not know. Um,
I'll take one because I know Mom will get the rest. Bill Cotter, I recognize
On
him.
the
from
left.
from left to right number.
Bill Cotter, Jerry Hansen, isn't it?
From left to right.
From left to right.
Okay.
I believe Jerry's the next one.
yep,
And then Elmer.
Elmer Feigl,
Okay, and then it would be Carl Eaton
yes.
and,
Duke Seal,
and Duke Seal,
Is that Ray Hanneman?
and it's Ray Henneman and Steve Granite, and then it's Dixon Grant and Aline
Halverson?
Halverson.
Okay.
Now, who is Aline Halverson?
She later married Kenny Jensen.
Okay. That's Ross.
And Mark.
Right,
Marks.
Ross.
Yep.
And
Okay.
she also had a daughter.
So do you guys? We have the mayor and we have somebody from city council here. Is that where you still meet? Is that still the same table?
same. I don't think it's the same table. I think those tables were built by M.R. Nelson, and I think they went to the courthouse because I think they slid. They were a table that he put up at the courthouse when he was a bookkeeper up there because they had the big books. And I think those are the ones that slid up there. That's not the same table. Those chairs, some of them chairs are in there, David, are they not?
I believe so, but the room is different because I can see the safe, and the safe is in the main office now.
Yeah,
So we're one room to the left of this picture.
yeah,
Everybody's in suits. I do notice that.
yeah.
Yes. So just for playing around purposes, and remember, you got microphones. What in that picture did every one of us eat at the Tasty Freeze?
I love the Tasty Freeze.
The tasty burgers.
Yes. And here's what I remember. I'll go back a few years here. The thing was when you went and got a Tasty burger and they came in a plastic bag. And there used to be a big slide down in the park, which I hope you have a picture of, that we would slide down that thing. You get them under your feet, and you would slide at a rapid rate of
The
speed.
plastic bags that the sandwiches came
Or
in?
excuse me, the wax bags.
Right.
And you would slide down there. Mike Lowney could probably shoot the farthest of anybody I know of my age. When he would get to the end of that slide, he was launched off the end. A little farther, going ahead a little bit, is when she works at the Super Shopper now. Help me out. Arnie's wife.
Christy.
Christy. She used to call me and Tim when she was running the place and sample the Tasty burgers. Oh, was that a good job?
The thing about it is you try to find a recipe, you can't almost
find
recreate
it.
what they made.
No.
It was kind of I've tried.
I think you just throw them together, and that's what came out. Me and my wife was tried, and it's not even close.
No. And then what's next to it?
Less
the Tasty Freeze.
conical.
Less's Conico. Does anybody have any?
I'm going to jump back to the Tasty Freeze. My favorite memory is that big bug zapper that hung up there, and I just like sitting there and watching it fry those mosquitoes.
Yeah. There and at Westside. Those are the two places that always had the big zappers.
And the zapper's still there. You can see it in the pictures. See it up there? It's hanging off that cone. It's there, David.
I know about where it is. I can't quite see it.
Yeah,
but-
it's there.
Okay.
This was my first part-time job. I just lived a football field away from it, so I was up there always emptying the trash and what was her name? Mrs. Stewart? Anna Lee?
Anna Lee.
Yeah.
And she actually graduated with my mother in 1935. She and my mother, Betty Ulrich, and Bessie Mae Waters, who still resides in Malta at the age of 101, were all the class of 1935.
It's not a very big building inside. I mean, it's amazing what they could do with that small of a building.
And what did they have really for a menu? All I remember is the hot dogs,
Footlongs.
the tasty burgers. Did they have hamburgers and French fries?
Yeah.
No. I don't remember. Do you? Do you?
I don't remember that either. I remember Dot and Al's were famous for their
Right.
hamburgers and French fries.
They had the foot-long hot dogs and banana splits. I remember
All the
those
different
two
ice cream
things.
things, yeah.
Yeah, all the ice cream
yeah.
things. I do not remember anything else because I was a kid and I didn't care.
And when did it close? Does anybody remember? I don't. I don't think it was open when I
When,
graduated from high school, but it must have been because I always hear stories about people that continued it, like the last people that
Okay.
had it.
When it closed, it was open for 1 or 2 years after Larry Matthews built Honkers and put up Taco John's. And then it went away after that because it was competing with Taco John's. I'm not sure. He had a Delta Ford over there when he was selling used cars. He had them on the highway. But that's the last I remember.
That would have
being
been
there.
90s?
Yeah, I think so. Who tore it down was Harold Sandvik and his boys.
Oh.
They tore it down and took all the wood.
Now that Conoco station, was that when C.K. Hansen had it? Prior to Ezzy?
That Conoco station never, that was Newton's.
Newton.
Les
Well,
Newton.
was that Newton later? C.K. Hansen was one of the original
Right.
Ezzy never
Conoco.
ever was on that
I
side.
remember Newton being there also, but
Newton was there too, yes. He was.
But Ezzy's was always on where Blades is at now.
Well, I think
no,
CK
that was
started
built
that.
later.
Was he there?
Ezzy, well, yeah, that building belonged to Ezzy, but
That was his bulk plant, his first bulk plant.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember he gave us those little sharp knives in there, and, you go over and get, I still got a bunch of them little Ezzy paring knives, and they were always super sharp. And,
And he purchased it from C.K. Hansen, I'm sure.
right, he did.
He worked for C.K. as a young boy, and then acquired it.
Here's what I remember: after you left the Tasty Freeze on your bike to go to the park, you would make your bike jump on the bell and ring it.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a big deal.
Oh, here we go.
So I'm assuming this must be a homecoming parade or something, and it would be a good one to come after Tasty Freeze because obviously the Tasty Freeze sponsored whatever this is happening. I might be a kid, or you might be a kid on a bike in that picture.
There's a lot of bicycles, so I'm wondering if it isn't something to do with bicycles.
But I think this series of pictures, when I found it, was a series that was in other parade pictures, so it was some sort of a parade of 4th of July or a homecoming or something. I bring up the picture for two reasons, because if we could figure out what year it is, but what else is in the picture that would maybe have any sort of story?
Okay, I got a
the
story.
Meadow Valley Creamery.
Right. And I've worked there. And my sophomore year, I worked for Einer. I was there. I had the best job in the world. I got hired on in the summer when they had the fair. And I used to go in there and make fudgesicles, popsicles, Cheerios, and butter. And butter we made, I think, 600 pounds at a time. And they had an old churn in there that was wooden. So you had to fill it up with water and let it sit for 3 or 4 days before it swelled up. And that made the best butter, you guys. We got the sour cream, or we got the cream from the Young Brothers out south. Arnott's used to send cream on the train from Hinsdale, so we'd have to go over and pick that up. Tim Bullard worked there at the same time. Susan Clovestead, and Murph was selling stuff out of there.
Murph?
And guess who worked there prior to you?
You.
That was my very first
And
first job.
So what years would that be?
Me, let's see, I graduated in 70, so that would be, 3 years back, 67.
So David, do you have any memories of that? You're a little bit older than me, so
No, I don't remember the creamery. I'll let Mom finish her story about working there, but
Yes.
I remember the building on the left here was where I went and got shots, and I hated that
I
building.
hated
So,
that
yes,
place.
yes.
Dr. Whiprood
And Malloy.
and Malloy would torture me in there. So
They did me too.
So
My mom took me there, and I had a bunch of planter's warts on my feet. And whoever was that walked out on the sidewalk during it, the rest of their life reminded me of the screaming they heard coming out of the building. For real.
yeah,
That
My aunt left me there because she took me one time because Mom couldn't, and I screamed so much that she left me there.
Yeah.
Well, and you embarrassed her because you went around and told everyone why you were there and asked them why they were there.
Oh,
And why were you there?
ingrown toenail. Which
Yeah.
they strapped you down and they cut it out.
I had plantar's warts on my feet. That's where they took them off, and they strapped me down and took them off.
Yeah,
And I screamed and screamed.
to this day, when my aunt sees me, it's Janice Strobel. It was Janice Black. She apologizes every time I see her for leaving me there, and that's been 50 years ago. But,
So you just mentioned where the milk came from. All the milk
The
came
cream.
from
The cream
It was
for there.
cream. Big vats, big cream cans.
Yeah.
They
came in
cans.
cans?
We used to go out and get the cream cans. They were in, I think, 29-gallon cans, if I remember right. We had the special cart. We carried them in. I used to go out and get them in a Divco, it was called. The Divco was in the ditch out there by George Cummings's for years. It was a 4-speed on the column. You pushed the clutch part way down, was clutch, all the way down was brake. So that's how you drove it. It didn't have an accelerator, it had a decelerator.
And what did this machine do?
It was a Divco, that's what you picked them up in, a little delivery truck. So if you look on the internet, you can get a picture of a Divco. They were actually pretty cool. So I'm looking at something there. I think that's a pretty new building, the doctor's office, because you see
It is new.
the concrete isn't poured up there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I see the Studebaker sitting there. I can't tell you the year. I'm thinking the year of the Chevy in the back is probably 58. I'm just guessing, right in there. Cool old car.
MDU was still, was already in that building.
And it's been there. Is Valley Motor there too, or is it there yet? Valley Motor was on this side of.
I believe so.
MDU.
It says something Matic, which is automatic or something on
Okay.
that building. But what year did you work there, Mom?
It would have been in 1956.
Okay.
I was.
So did they also package milk there?
Yes.
Was it all cream?
Oh no, they did milk.
No, they did. When I delivered milk there, we that we sold.
So was that packaged here? There was a machine
No,
that
the
sealed
only
it?
thing. No. Were they selling it there?
They had milk in that very back room.
But it was in bottles,
They
correct?
they processed the milk. It was a shoemaker that
Okay.
was back there. Don Shoemaker was his name,
Okay, I don't remember.
and
him.
he was an older man. And then at the time I worked there, Jimmy Donor worked there, and Teddy Cummings, and Joanne Hanson Jacobson, which would be Debbie Kindle's mother.
Yes, mother.
Yeah. I had to work out front at first because you couldn't work in the back until you were 16. And so I was a soda jerk
Yes,
out
you were.
front.
Did they have a soda machine to
They
to
had
do all
the
that stuff?
counter and you made milkshakes and then once you were 16, then you were allowed to go in the back and help with testing the cream. That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a regular tester, put the cream in the little vials and spin it to come up with the butterfat content.
Yep.
And the people that had sweet cream were paid 10 cents more than the ones that had the sour cream.
Huh.
And some of that cream would be like marshmallow because they wanted that high butterfat content, and you had to literally dig it out of the cream can
Yes,
with
you
your
did.
hands.
Oh.
It was
Kay, when they packaged the milk, did you guys have glass jugs there to put it in and you press the caps on, or do you remember?
I don't remember that part.
I used to deliver glass gallon jugs. Murph did the route the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then he had a Hinsdale route and the reservation route on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I delivered milk at 2:00 in the morning for that time. That was one of the best jobs I ever had. That's all I could say because I can't say too much more about it.
I remember David Broadbrooks driving the milk truck.
Yes, he
And
did.
There was no doors on it. You just kind of
Nope.
stood and drove and
Mhm.
started at 2 a.m.
Yes, you did.
I remember Einar Olsen as being one of the hardest working men I had ever
That's the hard.
observed. I mean, you would, if you weren't doing something, you would just jump up and down just to be busy because he was on the run all the time, and he kind of had a limp,
Yeah,
but
I do remember that.
but it didn't slow him up. He just was a goer. Yeah, hard worker.
And before I went to work for him, he got his hand caught in a butter churn, or the butter cutter, or whatever it was, where they took the butter out and then they put it through this thing in 1 pound packages, and Arilla would pack it, and he got his hand cut in there, and all he had was a claw.
I remember that.
Right. And he could make Dixie cups. That machine would go up to 10. I could make Dixie cups on 3. He had a claw. He could make them on 10. It was unreal, and you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was it's hard.
What was her name, Mrs. Olson?
Arilla.
Arilla.
At the cemetery, when I was standing next to their headstone with Jack Stenswick, I didn't know who they were. And he pointed at her name and said, she used to give me ice cream.
You remembered.
He
Yeah.
did. And I thought that was pretty cool.
So I threw another picture up just because. I'll just ask questions. Is this the same thing as the Orange Room?
No.
No.
No,
'Cause
the
I
lobby was across the street from the Orange Room to the west. It was.
What's there now?
What's that? The
What's-
lobby.
yeah.
The lobby. Well, it burned down. You know, originally it burned, and then they rebuilt it. And so where the lobby is now is where the bullet. Kind of the bullet is there, and then downstairs, you had your hole. You know.
So where the insurance office part is now?
Mm-hmm. Well, downstairs, yeah, and it was also my clothing store
Right.
later.
Yeah.
Well, that was where the Bullet is now.
Where the bullet is now is
That
where
used to be the Fifth Avenue
that's where-
Hotel.
It
yeah,
did.
yeah, and the old post office used to be there too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you had your lobby cafe. You went up these stairs, and you had your lobby cafe up above.
Was it part of the Fifth
Before-
Avenue
Before
Hotel?
it burned, no, it was to the north of
Okay.
the Fifth Avenue.
And who was the cook in the lobby cafe? Cliff Moore?
Could have been, yeah.
Lonnie Feature? There were 2 cooks that I remember. Myrtle Pabst was a waitress in there. So.
They had live music 4 nights a week.
But they owned, Baumgartners owned that cafe and the Orange Room, because I also worked at the Orange Room.
I remember the Orange Room. I remember going there for smorgasbord often.
Well, at that time, then the lobby moved around onto Front Street. It was right in front of the Orange Room.
Yeah.
They had the
Okay.
lobby.
Because I know we went in from the back to
And
get to
this
the Orange
is,
Room.
but this here is, you're talking about Rogers Saloon, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, that's
This-
the lobby. So that was the one on Front Street.
Yeah, it was. That's
And the Orange Room was behind it.
So
right.
this would have maybe been that time where they did the smorgasbord in the back of the lobby or something. Because I remember
Yeah,
going
it
there.
was.
and
Yeah, no, it was in the Orange Room. You had the lobby in the front, the bar, and then you had the Orange Room, and then there was the building where Ben Franklin is now. That back part was the smorgasbord.
Right.
Yeah.
And we used to park in the back and go in that way.
the side door.
And I bet we went there a couple Sundays a month
We did too.
Yeah.
at least. I mean, it was just where we went.
Yeah.
And you have what was called bear and a beef, and
Every
bear,
time.
Oh, excuse me, bear and a beef in those days was, and to me this day is the toughest piece of beef there is. But people, lived for that.
Well, Bill Baumgartner actually ran the supper club, and Inga ran the cafe.
Right. Here we go.
So about what year would that be? What decade? Let's narrow it down that way.
Okay, you probably have it narrowed down to the year.
Is that
for
is
sure.
that Bears Husky?
Byers ran that. Yeah.
And that's where that sits where the museum's old building sits, where Multi-Tire has their
Yeah,
shop.
Multi-Tire has it now.
And then to the left of that picture is where the truck pumps were, between that and the train station. Wasn't there because it was a truck stop. It was called Bears Truck Stop, wasn't it?
Mm-mm. That was on the east end of town. What is there is F&R's. I think
Storage. Yeah.
yeah, they're F&R storage.
So where was the truck stop at?
Bears Truck Stop is where West Side is now.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I remember it had the big grizzly bears sitting
Yeah, okay.
outside.
and it burnt down.
Right, I remember that.
Okay, here, the Don Wombold worked there, and we had old Studebaker, and it was the year Kennedy got killed, which was 63. We had came to town because my brother had smashed his fingers, and it was my mom's second trip to town because he came to town. We came to town, the Studebaker overheated. We were heading out just past where Multi-Auto is now. Don Wombold didn't latch the hood on the old Studebaker, and it blew up, and the semi was coming, and my mom freaked out. So by that time, she was about ready to kill somebody, and we were pretty quiet in the back because in the car there was these wooden yardsticks that came from the Merc that were made of solid wood, and she was a pretty good sword fighter.
Did you find Don to give him a little bit of?
My mom did, and
Yeah.
so did my dad.
Yeah.
But my dad was not happy when we lived out. My dad worked for Ed Smith, and that's where the Hooterites have their place now. We lived out that far.
So would you then say this is probably from the early '60s? This picture. Around that time, you said
Possibly,
63, and then
yeah.
around that time.
Yeah.
I think so.
Or late 50s or.
Yeah, I'd say 60s. If I could see a better picture, I'd have to look at the car. So, cars give things away pretty good.
Now, we're doing this as just a sample thing, so knowing the people that would be in that conversation, that's the thing. You just pair the right people,
Right.
and then gather the pictures they don't know about that they could somehow or another be associated with. Does any of that picture still exist?
I'm trying to figure out if that's the Landusky Mill or the Zortman Mill. I'm trying to look out in the prairie and see what I recognize, but I'm not 100% sure which.
Is that a cabin down to the left in the trees there, David? I don't know
It
that
looks
much
like
about it.
Well, there's a lot of cabins, and that would probably be the Zortman side, which would be the Ruby Gulch, town of Ruby Gulch. And this would be the Ruby Gulch Mill.
I think that's the one that Judy Michaels painted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does
Isn't it?
does any of it exist anymore?
The mill's still there, not that big, but some of it's still there. I think that is the Zortman
You can see
side.
that road going from it to the right. There on
coming
the
down
side
from the
on
mill?
the side of the mountain.
That whole town though is gone. Where all the buildings are, they filled that valley in, but they filled it up about to the mill.
Did it get remined from the '80s mining? All that stuff get tore out and the leach padded and everything else, or does those mountains still exist?
What we see is still there. They mine this way.
Okay, toward.
Yeah, they put a dam across that valley and then filled it up on this side.
I was gone during all the '90s. Did you guys go to this?
I went to the fight.
Do you have any memories of it? This is one Kenny used to always kind of talk about. He brought up this fight 2 or 3 different times in the last couple of years. He must have been somewhat involved with it.
He helped promote it.
Did he?
And he told me stories too, like he did you. It was sponsored by the Zortman Mining Company, which I worked for them, but I don't remember if I went. I really don't.
I did go. I still got my tickets. I have autograph from the kid he fought, Cat Dubray, I believe was his name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And they built all the big white bleachers that used to be around here, the big tall ones. That's what they built that fight for. And they had all the grandstands painted. And I don't think they did very well because there was a lot of empty seats. You could pretty much pick a place you wanted to sit because
They were pretty spendy tickets, even in 1990. Those just are $40
exactly.
and $50 tickets. Who won? Did Todd win?
I think he did, didn't
he
he?
did.
Yeah.
He hit him so hard in the side that I could hear it up there, and he knocked him right down to the ground. I talked to that kid at the night before the fight. Him and his trainer were in there, and he was playing a poker machine. And I talked to him, and that's when I got his autograph from the kid. So, and he wasn't, he's a good kid.
Wasn't
didn't do
it
so very
Felix the Cat Debray?
well. Felix Cat Dubray. That was his name.
Yeah. See, I was gone during that whole time.
I just remember reading about it, but Kenny,
There
I
was-
remember Kenny saying they lost money because a bunch of buses that were coming from Great Falls,
Didn't make it.
something happened. They didn't make it, and it was just full of people that were going to buy these $50.
Because of the Foster being from Great Falls angle.
Right.
Yeah.
They promoted it heavily there, and
Mm-hmm.
I think they lost money on it.
But he went to school here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was 7 years old when he left. Is what Dan Snyder has his whole history.
Yeah.
You know, so.
So I think this said it was from I didn't write it down, 1960 something, and the horse races were taking place. So you can see the
Okay.
the starting gate out there for the horses. Look at how many cars are there.
Unreal.
Well, they had Paramutual after that too,
Yeah.
because I remember I worked for the Paramutual. Several of us from the school, they hired us to sell at the Paramutual.
With the ticket, the bet
you
tickets
did?
and everything else. Yeah.
I remember betting there. I don't know if I had to pay my dad to bet or mom, but
I do too.
I remember betting,
I do too.
and the big board was there that would give you your odds. And
So it must have went pretty good into the 70s because I do remember it also.
My brother Dick, he went and collected samples from the horses so they could drug test them. That
Did they
his
really? They
job.
drug
They
tested back
said you-
then?
Yeah, they tested them. I think it was litmus paper or something.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what they did, but he said he had to collect a pee, and he said, "You got a lot on you because they just horses. They don't cooperate peeing in a bottle." So I remember him saying that. I do remember when I was younger, I was standing down by where the road comes across right there, and they had chariot races. And there's a horse comes sailing by there, and somehow or another the hoof flipped right off the horse, you guys. I'd never heard a horse scream like that before in my life.
The actual hoof came off the horse?
hoof came off, and the hoof was laying there, and the horse was running and screaming, and that was it.
I didn't even know that could happen.
I didn't either. I asked my dad about it. He said it's very rare, but it can happen. But we heard a gunshot shortly after that. You know, they put the horse down.
Wow.
And it was a chuck wagon race. They had, they were pretty, what they were is barrels, with wheels.
Yeah.
here's one thing I noticed is that now everybody has a pickup pulling a horse trailer, and they're all stock trucks. There's not a single horse trailer in any of the pictures.
True.
Because everybody carried their horses in the back of the pickup.
They
In
had
the
to be able
stock
to
truck.
jump in the back of a truck or a pickup at most.
Stock rack.
And
But there was Paramutuals in the late 70s.
Yeah.
They reinstated it, and these people in Shelby were the ones that actually ran the Paramutual. They were from Shelby, and they really knew what they were doing. They had all the machines for selling the tickets, you know,
And that would be the phase that I remember.
and
that I
that's where you
remember.
paid, and that's where you took the money. Yeah, and
I remember going with Grandpa, and he'd always take the picture of the winner owner and the
Was
trainer
he-
with the horse with their stuff after every
Okay.
race.
Isn't that little building next to the grandstand, is that where the one that is that where the wire was and they took the picture of the winning horse?
I don't remember.
I remember a picture being there, and I remember your grandpa being in the booth,
Yeah.
taking pictures for the photo
and-
finish.
On the infield in that square? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was there at the other
Yeah.
end of the arena.
And see, that's right next to the scout booth, right
okay,
there.
that little tall white building. Okay.
That's gone, but it was there for quite a few years. My grandma Demery's lived for that horse racing. Oh boy, she loved that. So
there were a lot of people that enjoyed it.
The midway doesn't look as big as I remember it.
I agree. I always thought it was huge, but now that I look at it, I go, it wasn't as huge.
Because where all those cars are parked
Yeah.
is where the midway is now. They've just shifted it that direction.
Yes.
And it just doesn't. Maybe it got bigger after that picture or something, but because it was bigger.
You think so?
Yeah, but maybe we were just littler.
Yeah, I think
was
you were.
That's the thing.
You were smaller.
I remember going over the overpass, and at that point is about when you could see the lights from the
You
fair.
could see the lights. I remember that when I was a kid. I got all excited.
Yeah, the two things you'd see from a distance were that and the smokestack in Great Falls.
Right.
That's where those were your two visuals for I'm that close. Nothing like going to the fair as a kid.
Yeah.
When I lived in Zortman, we had some race horses that we entered in the Dotson Fair, and we had a little black dog that lived with the horses, and we couldn't get him away from the one that we raced, and he followed the horses all the way around the track.
Really?
And I remember the announcer saying, "And coming in dead last is a little black dog."
So here's a couple characters. It was a firemen's get together for their year-end
I know those
celebration
guys.
in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
And in a second, I'm going to show the group picture, but I remember
Both those
These-
guys.
I remember all three of them very well. But the two on the left for me were always kind of drinking buddies with my dad, so that kind of thing. But
Cliff and Jimmy Allen.
Jimmy cut hair.
Says
What
Ji-
did Cliff do?
He worked for the county.
Is that what he did for a living?
Yeah. For
Like what for the county? Roads?
his blade operator.
Oh, okay. So that kind of thing. I never knew. He was just always at the
Yeah.
pastime drinking beer with my dad, so I never knew.
Well, and Jimmy was really a musician too.
He was
Was
a
he?
good musician.
They had their band.
Played the drums.
He was a drummer? Maybe I do remember
He was,
that.
and he played the guitar too. I think.
Yeah.
Didn't he own the poop truck?
Later,
Yeah, he
I
did
think.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a really, really good. They
did.
wonderful music at the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy was part of that.
One thing when I was tending bar, Jimmy had a tom-tom, and you didn't put. That was a place where you put the drinks, because he said, "I'd never play that." He said, "You set them right down there." Yours was quite a stack out. Not saying anything bad about Jimmy. He's one of the nicest guys I know, and I love the man to death. But he could play them drums, but you did not. That's where you put the drinks.
Yeah, we're on the tom tom. And this was from that same meeting where the picture of those two were in, but there's a cast of characters from the 60s. This was 1967.
I
Malta
know
Fire
a
Department.
bunch of those guys. That's aging me.
Yes, it is.
As I look at it, I know my dad and I know Bob Fleshy, and is that Dwayne Simonton in the middle on the bottom?
Yes, it is.
It is, and then
You start on the left there on the bottom. It'd be Weirs, isn't it? The far left one.
you're the one that
Okay.
training us. Who are these people?
And then Tommy Bowes, and then it's Dwayne, and
Who's
then
the third guy?
Billy Jim Campbell.
Billy Jim Campbell. What did he do?
He was the
Postman.
postmaster.
Postmaster. Yep.
And then you have Bill Prey, and
Yeah.
then you have Franklin Smith.
You know that other guy to the right?
Where are we at? Oh,
To the right of Bill Prey?
yeah. That's why I said my dad. And then go up to the top left now and keep going.
I don't know who the guy is, but
Is that Leroy Anderson?
guarantee you he has an Einer or a Meadow Valley Creamery hat on, because they had box of those. That's what you wore to keep your hair out of the ice cream when I was there.
And then Jimmy? Is that no?
Jimmy and Roger,
Jim
Roger
McCoy.
Earl.
and then Jim McCoy and Louis in the back,
Kamala,
Johnny Kamla, and then Paul Jacobson.
Paul Jacobson.
Behind him, I can't see. Is that Bill Starkey, maybe? See the
I
upper
see Cliff
part.
back there. Who's the big tall guy? I'm struggling there.
Fleshy. You mean way in the back?
Yeah.
That's the one I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Starkey's that tall. Well, Fleshy, and then Cliff Lundstrom, Carl Eaton, and Jerry Hansen, and Gilbertson,
Yeah. Willis.
Willis McKeon, and Hoynes.
Oof,
Okay.
I wouldn't have got very many.
So where would you guess that picture's taken at?
That was down in the bucket of blood.
That was there.
I
Okay.
think so. The siding kind of reminds me of that. In the old bucket that used to be in the
Down below the pastime.
yeah.
Mhm.
So does that look about right?
There is some other pictures that exist that I know were from then we could compare. I just
Yeah,
I didn't know.
See your pipes up on the ceiling?
I
That's
do.
a pretty good clue that it was downstairs.
Yeah, because that's Steam heat.
The
Yeah,
Malta-
I'm sure that's where that was.
The Malta Fire Department from 1967.
Right.
I bet that is Bill Sturkey.
Ah, could be.
I think he was with the fire department, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was.
I could use any, and I prepared these pictures ahead of time quickly. And I got tons of these kind of pictures, so no matter pretty much who I would be visiting with, Malta High School stories would come up by just showing a picture of the high school,
Yep.
depending on the gathering and the people. Like the stories you must have of the Malta High School.
Well, definitely. I mean, it took
Me
me
too.
a long time.
Well, we all
long,
do.
long time to get out of there, you know.
Yes. Yeah, you probably remember me getting in trouble my freshman year and getting sent down to see you in the office. And then I would end up outside washing a car in the little cement area for my punishment. And then I would usually get cookies from the principal or superintendent's wife. It was
Oh, Evelyn?
Nordland.
No.
Oh, Nordland.
Mrs.
Yeah,
Nordland.
okay.
K. Nordland.
And he would say, Greg, you need to be nicer to Miss Funk. Go out and wash my car. And I'd go out there and she'd show up with cookies. And I was like, I can get kicked out of class all the time. I'd
That's
rather
right.
do this.
There you go.
But just envision, depending on the audience, all you need is a picture of something
Yeah.
to get a conversation rolling about, I remember whatever, be it the story. And this one popped up, and it was kind of funny just because of people in it and who I
Oh
knew
my
was coming.
Goodness.
This was 1983 at the Elmer at the Feigl Photo softball tournament. I still have my mug from these because I know in other pictures from the same setting, Elmer was giving the trophy. Do we recognize everybody in there? Somebody's a little skinnier on the left.
Right.
There's quite a few of them that are skinnier
Yes.
Yeah.
now or then.
So from
Right.
left to right, we have Fuzz. And
Who-
then,
Who's the other guy?
I don't know. Who's
don't
who's
know
next
either.
to Fuzz?
You've got to take those glasses off. At first, I was thinking it was a Van Hout, but I don't think it is.
Oh, that could be. That
You
could
think
be
it
a Van
is?
Hout. Yes, you're
Is
right.
it John? He
So-
was the same age as Blaine.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Chad, that was the one for sure. That's the one in the picture I didn't know either.
Yeah, I don't either. But obviously, number 12 is my brother Blaine. Then is that a Dara in the back? I'm not sure.
Isn't it John Smith?
Oh, it's John Smith.
I think so.
Okay.
Delmer Henry,
Delmer,
Delmer,
Troy
Troy Kelsey.
Kelsey,
Kelsey.
and Mr. Otteson.
Yes, sir.
And I'll state the obvious. Short shorts must have
I
really been
was
in
gonna-
style.
Yeah, look at the look at the.
I was going to say that's what first thing caught my eye. Look at them short shorts.
Andy might get arrested nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, Andy's are shorter than Fuzz's.
But that's what the basketball
Either
team
that or
wore.
Fuzz is shorter than Andy. I don't know.
That's a small softball team, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
got
then
one
Jimmy-
more story at the creamery. Tim Bullard worked there, and Tim come in hungover one day, and we made this fudgesicle mix. It was the best stuff. You know, it's best chocolate milk in the world. Well, they were stacked too high in there, and Tim was down on his knees, and he was drinking out of one of them. And Einer comes in and said, "Tim, go get a cup." And it was all Tim could do because it scared him so bad. It's a good thing I was there. He just spilled that thing over the top of his head. But I'll never, ever, ever forget that as long as I live. That was funny. So
I remember one time Einer told me to turn off. He had these great big hoses that were hooked up on the side, you know, that he cleaned off the floors with and all of that. And powerful. Anyway, he told me to turn this one off. And I went over and I didn't realize one was cold water, the other one was steam. To make that hot water. And I turned off the cold, and that steam started flopping that hose around like a great big old snake, you know. Steam was going everywhere, and I'm screaming because it scared the heck out of me. And he thought I'd been, you know, burnt really badly. No, I was just scared.
Now, back in that time, in the creamery picture, was it still just the building that exists now? All of that happened inside that little building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The front part was just a little fountain, and had
Little soda
the little
jerks. Right?
counter with
I
some
kind of remember that a
stools.
little bit.
And we made a lot of milkshakes there. And then the back part was they tested the cream and they made the butter and they made the fudgesicles and the Dixie cups and ice cream and popsicles and milk. And,
There was a freezer there that was a walk-in freezer, just
Yep.
plumb full of ice. I don't think it was ever thawed out its whole life. And then the cooler was over to that. In the back was the boiler and the compressors where you changed to the different machines, to the ice cream machine. And we used to turn the well, anyway, my job in the back to the left there, you can't see it, there was a pipe. And I loved that part of my job. When I come in from school, the boiler was back there, so you have to blow the boiler off every day. So at the time, there was no cement back there. And it was just all dirt and water and holes, and there was nothing back there. But people walked by there, a lot of them. So I'd wait till somebody was walking by, and I'd open that stuff. And it'd blow the steam up close, and all that got them after that was wet because it wasn't hot. And I'd be looking inside, laughing. And, hey, is that damn camera kid over there? That'd be me.
So what was behind it? That was no First State Bank. There was no, what was there?
First
You said-
Security.
Our
No,
First
no.
Security Bank, I mean. So what was it, empty, or was there things there
It was
that,
just a big parking lot. Just a
dirt
big
parking lot?
Dirt parking lot.
The back of
Roger
the
was-
Fifth Avenue?
Yeah, behind the Fifth Avenue. Roger was he was the one that put concrete back there. Jebco, the guys that wind blew in one day, he hired them. They're the ones that built Mix Building, and they built Humbert Building. They came here from Florida. Joe, Ed, and Bob, and I worked for them for a while, and they were concrete finishers, and they were good. They were good.
Then the PCA office was back there,
Yeah.
where KMMR is now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And those guys could sing, and I worked for them. They'd finish concrete, and those guys could harmonize and sing old hymns, unreal. You know, they'd be blasting it out, and people come by. Who are those guys? But it was interesting working for those guys.
You know, between the Tasty Freeze and the Creamery, I have this huge hankering for ice cream right now.
Yeah. And
You-
during this time, did Joe's exist? When did Joe and Wanda open Joe's?
No, it did not exist.
Okay. I worked for them in 1967, and I think they'd been open like 4 or 5 years before that. Maybe more. I don't remember. I went out there and got a job. I know at the time he had it for sale for $5,000.
Joe's In and Out?
Yes.
Early after he opened it, he wanted to sell it?
$5,000 when I was working there. That's what he told me to sell it
And
for,
what
was
year was that,
$5,000.
John? What
About
year?
what year?
I worked there in 1967.
Wonder why he wanted to sell it all. He just started it.
Well, he built across the
Yeah.
He-
across the road there, maybe the Pizza Corral.
That was
That was in the-
1981.
That was 80s.
He
Yeah.
built it my senior year in high school.
Okay. It used to be the Valley Drive-In out there.
Next to it. That's where
Yeah,
the
north
AS
of it.
Yeah.
North of it.
See, Tom Golick
used to make pizzas there.
to make a best pizza.
Yep.
You know, I'll have to ask Tom, but I think they sent him somewheres to train him to make pizzas.
For Valley.
For the theater.
Yeah.
See, I was the very first one to work there.
And was that also owned by
Carl and Irene
yep.
built it, and Bobby and Bill were supposed to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there and the creamery. I'd work at the creamery until 5 and then head out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a junior, that would have been in 57.
There's a picture somewhere in these files of Mom standing there with about 4 other ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's fun looking at the prices, like hot dogs 25 cents or
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
they were.
You used
Out
to
of the
work there,
drive-in.
did you not, David?
I didn't work at the drive-in. I worked at the.
Oh, you worked at the
Yeah.
theater,
Theater.
correct.
I think it had closed by then, hadn't it?
It was
Dave?
early 70s.
Okay,
When
I'll
it
tell you a
closed, had to
drive-in story. Me and Randy Skinner and Dennis were coming down the hill from my Uncle Jim's. Wind was blowing about 900 miles an hour. And we stopped there at the bottom of the hill coming onto Highway 191 and looked over to see half the screen blow down and hit the ground.
Oh dear.
And dust flew everywhere. So we called Carl. Carl was, by that time, he liked his, what was he, a Scotch drinker? I think.
No.
But
I think it was
Anyway, he came
Whiskey.
out there.
martinis or
Yeah,
whiskey.
he
Yeah.
said, "You're pulling my leg." No, we aren't. He came out there and he looked at it and he just kind of shook his head, drove off. But they did rebuild it after that. But I'd never seen anything like that before. That thing was huge, and half of it blew down, and dust flew after we hit that. I can't remember the year. Me and Randy ran together from, I think we started running together in 7th grade. My Uncle Jim, him and Dennis, they were team ropers, so we were out there. But I don't remember the year. So.
Well,
So-
it was very, very busy there. We were really busy. We sold a lot of hot dogs. We had the hot dogs on the rollers,
Rollers. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of popcorn. Lots of buttered popcorn. And there were 3 or 4 of us that worked behind the counter. It was a great big long counter. And Kay LaFond and Bev
Lawton.
Nitz and Roberta Simpson and myself. 4 of us.
My food memory is only Golig making pizzas, and they were
Yeah.
so good.
See, and they didn't even have pizzas then. They didn't introduce them till
Oh, those.
David was a baby, and we ordered him a hamburger, and we ordered the pizza, and he couldn't eat his hamburger because the smell of the pizza made him sick.
I remember that.
Do you?
I think the movie was Night of the Grizzly, and that scared the hell out of me too. I think
You had a bad experience at the
The
theater.
whole
Now, who eats more pizza than Dave? Yeah, but
but
the smell just made him.
I vividly remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The night. What
I-
was the name of the movie?
I think it was Night of the Grizzly or Return something with a grizzly bear.
You know, the one that scared,
Scared
me
and
most
sick
was,
to the stomach.
was the Blob.
You remember that?
And
there?
you know what the Blob was? Was soap suds coming out of that wash barrel.
Oh, really?
That one scared me half to death. Another one I saw out there, I never laughed so hard in my life, was Night of the Lepus.
I remember that about rabbits.
Yeah.
Rabbits taking over, huge rabbits,
Yeah.
6-foot rabbits.
Derailed trains. Night of the Lepus.
Now on the drive-in, Joe and Wanda Reynolds told me that he would let them park a car in there, and then he had built a gate for their kids so
Yep.
they could come in and sit in the car and watch the movies.
Just part of a neighborly kind of agreement,
I
so they
guess
could come
so.
over.
Yeah, he did that. There was a gate in there.
Hmm.
He'd let them go in there and sit in there. And if we were working afterwards, we could go over and sit in there too if we wanted after we got off. One more story about the drive-in. Dan Lowney worked out there. And we were out there one day, and here comes Harold Live. You know, and Harold, he liked to have a few. He drank a lot of Budweiser. And he came in backwards and popped all 4 of his tires.
Oh,
The
no.
sign says, "Do not come this way." And old Dan's waving at him, and he thinks he's waving in. Pop, 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 pop.
Yeah, it had those.
Yeah. The reverse cattle guard.
Yeah.
The one you don't drive the wrong way on.
Yeah.
Another story on Harold Live. See that little building? There's that little building between the creamery and the medical center.
Yes.
Remember that storage building that he had
Was
that?
that?
He owned that.
Harold did.
Harold did. And when I was in Adeline's World, I looked out my back door one day, and this horse was looking out the window of. It was inside that building, looking out at me.
Ooh.
So
Sure.
what, I don't remember a building being there. What kind of
It
building
was
was it?
just a storage building, a
They-
garage,
Okay.
and a setback.
Two
You know, I
garages.
do remember that. Because it
Yeah.
was not even that long ago. He tore that stuff down
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
he
when,
just built
when
the
Ed built, he
yeah.
tore it down.
Okay, I
But he
do.
was keeping his horse in there.
Oh no, really?
Yes.
It was like a car garage.
Yeah,
Okay.
This
It
horse was
was.
looking at me. Yeah.
He liked horses, and
he did.
he paid me once to ride my horse along with his horse. Oh, okay. and I think he paid me $5 or something, but I got to go pick $5 worth of stuff out of his store, which was
What store did he have?
was it
Edwards and
Edwards
Collins.
and
Yeah.
Okay,
McCollins
right.
for years.
Yeah.
but it had a huge tack department.
Yeah.
And I can remember, like, I couldn't make up my mind on what I could get. There were so many things that you could get for $5 that,
I remember going in that store and just smelling the leather.
yeah.
He never put anything on sale. You know, when Rod Rhodes, in fact, I just came across all the paperwork when Rod Rhodes bought that. He didn't know what to do with all this inventory. I mean, it went back many, many, many years down the basement. And so I suggested, remember that when I had Debbie involved?
Yes,
I said,
do.
let's have an auction behind my store there in that parking lot. I said, because I have clothes that are on the sale rack, and I'll pull in these gals to do the modeling. And so we sold everything from toilet seats to cowboy hats to women's clothing. And Randy,
Appliances.
yeah, and Randy was the auctioneer, and we had a big canopy tent up for people to sit under, and I had Uncle Roger as the cashier, you know.
Yep.
And I found all kinds of those pictures from that the other day, and I have them in an envelope to mail to Rod Rhodes. And I have several pictures of Debbie that I'm going to give to her. I had Debbie Dimmering. I had all kinds of people, all sizes modeling, and it worked.
Yeah.
It really worked.
I remember that now that you brought that up. It's kind of dim in my mind, like some things. But when you bring it up, I do have some recall to bring it back, and that's a good memory.
Oh, Debbie
Okay.
she was in just doggy heaven that day. She just loved it.
Yep.
And, you know, and she looked really, really good in that clothing. It was good.
Yeah, she did.
Kenny Wadrick worked there for years till he opened his own store. But,
My grandma Wilson worked there.
We're talking about Edwards and McCollum.
yes.
Right.
Harold Olson worked there for a lot of years.
If you went in at the right time, there would be something on sale. He would sell you something at a discount,
And they,
depending on what time of the day it was.
Really?
Really?
Okay.
Truly.
and he's the only guy I knew that the Budweiser beer truck would pull up in his driveway
At home?
at home. And he had this red and white pickup, and he'd had a couple, 3 horses, and he'd be driving down the road exercising his horses with that red and white pickup.
That's right. I remember trailing him.
That's where he paid me to ride alongside of him so they wouldn't be nervous.
That was your $5 that you got?
Well, I rode my horse next to the ones he pulled behind his pickup.
There you go. I don't remember any of that.
Okay. And you know, Harold was a good guy. He treated me real good. He treated my grandma good. He swore like a sailor, and my grandma never said a nasty word in her life. And how she put up with that guy, I'll never know. But when I first went to work for the city on Saturdays, he'd come out after the garbage truck was there, and lightning would strike every morning after he left. He'd come out and light a fire, burn the garbage up. You know, and that was, at the time you could do that. Nobody cared because it saved a bunch of room. But, you know, they always said, lightning again, lightning in the winter. Yeah, it's Harold. He'd go out there, had a little torch, and you'd see him out there, click, click, click. And he was a good guy.
He was good-hearted.
Did he have family? Did he have kids? Is there lives and
Very,
stuff?
very talented. His wife was a piano teacher for years.
Ruth?
And he had 3 daughters.
Ruth was one. She was a little older than me. She could play the piano.
They all could.
Do any of them still have any ties to Phillips County? Does that name gone from Phillips County? It's
They're all
away.
gone from Phillips County.
Yeah.
Barb is in, the one that was a year younger than me is in Kalispell.
Oh.
And very accomplished musician. They
Yes.
all were.
They were
Marion,
all very accomplished.
Marion passed away.
Was
I believe.
she a piano teacher?
Mrs. Leib was.
Yeah.
Mrs. Harold Leib was for years.
So
And
did Mr.
she had deep, deep roots in Phillips County, too. She was in Edwards.
I was just going to say, did he buy it from an Edwards or a McCollum?
No, Edwards, he was that Edwards. It was no relation to Lucille Edwards.
That who started the store?
Ruth Leib, let's see,
Who started Edwards and McCollum?
Edwards and McClellan.
So
So it was either her grandfather or her father
So
that
it was
started. I would
family.
say it was probably her father.
That store was one of the first ones in Malta. You could see it. I think you could see the old bank where the Stockman used to be was a bank, and I think they're there on the corner, if I remember right.
And I'll put a picture up. We're not looking at it, but I'll put a picture up when I throw this for us to look at. I'm gonna produce this with our pictures so you kind of know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the first. It's in almost all of the early pictures where there's very little left of except for that building of Malta.
Yeah.
Well, you can tell by the fixtures inside the building; they're original.
Still,
So
Didn't Grandma Betty live upstairs?
no, she worked. That was the first BLM office. Was right up in that corner, and 3 people worked there.
the BLM office was above them.
Yep, right up above on the northwest corner was the BLM office, and the head of it was Frank Morgan, who was Donna Newby's father. He was the manager, and then there was a little Bart McMenemy that worked there, and my mom was the secretary. And later on, a younger man came to work there. His last name was Russell. I wanted to say Charlie Russell, and I knew that wasn't right. But anyway, so there were 4 of them then. And then across the hall was a beauty parlor, Marguerite Runge, and then down the hall quite a ways, was Dr. Morrow, which would be Julie Howell's father and Sue Crone's father.
I didn't know all those were up there.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't know any of
Yeah.
that. That was all.
And if I remember right up there was one of those windows that opened and had an attorney. I don't know how long he was there, but when Mike Carney lived up there,
I think maybe Steve Granite was up there.
he could have been, because if I remember right, above those doors, there are great big windows that you could open, and I think it said attorney up there.
I know
So-
Steve Granite used to be above for State Bank.
Yes, he did.
I remember that.
Yeah. And Jim Harrison. Jim Harrison actually
Yes.
was ahead of Steve Granite, and they were up above for State Bank.
Didn't Jim Harrison end up being a judge somewhere?
He was a
Supreme Court
Supreme
Justice.
Court Justice
In Montana.
Chief.
Yeah,
That was Jim Losslaven's grandpa.
right.
And he built the house catty corner from the hospital that Mark Newby bought before he went to the home.
Kitty corner from the hospital. Which one's
The
that?
old hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Which
right
house?
next to the Edwards house where Al DeVork lives. On 4th Street.
I remember Larkham's had the house right
That
across
was
the street.
Right.
Larkham's.
It's just west of Larkham's house.
Across
Okay.
the street west, yeah.
That little.
It's a big
Full-
yard, like a double,
Yeah.
triple lot.
Full finished basement, full bar, fireplace upstairs, downstairs.
Who lives there now? It's irrelevant to what we're talking about.
I think
Now, are
Newby's,
you talking about the house that Losslaven built?
Who?
Losslaven. Losslaven's built that red.
I don't know who's got the house now, but it's right across the street from Larkham.
It sounds really grand. Does it
Yeah.
still exist
It is.
in that state?
At the time, me and Jim used to go down there, and he had a lot of clear bottles that we filled up with water and, mixed it up for him, and we took the good stuff. But one day he said, just come and ask me. He said, I hate to have to, I don't like ditches and that sort of stuff. But he had a billiard table down there, pool table,
That-
class. They're still there.
You know what? That was Losslaven. That was Barbara's dad that built it.
Barbara's dad, excuse
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yes.
I knew that wasn't
Sorry,
clicking.
that was RJ.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Because
Where
Jim
did-
Harrison's house was over there, just a block north of the grade school, in the middle of the block.
Yes, sorry, I was mistaken.
Yeah,
I'm an agent.
where Linda Brown lives now.
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
That was Jim Harrison's house.
Wes and
Yeah.
Linda Brown. So-
Yeah.
Okay.
You were
Yeah.
in the right family. You
Yeah.
just had the wrong,
And that was
wrong grandparents.
and that was a fancy house too in its day.
Yeah,
It still is. It's still pretty old.
yeah.
We used to go up there. He had a ham radio up there.
How about the house you're living in? I remember that one. Romus has had it.
Yeah.
He was head of Montana Power.
Yep.
Can you imagine how many people lived in Malta in such a small proximity compared. Well, I mean, imagine we lived through it, but compare it to today, it was a total different world. You'd have people with 10 kids in a house that a couple lives in now, and
Yeah.
they don't think they have enough room.
You got that right.
That's
6 of us lived in the house I live in now.
Yep.
And we were happy to live in there because it was a cool place. And I've been happier to live in there now because I'm living in my younger life.
Hmm.
So I love my house.
It's a beautiful home.
My
Oh.
house was built in 1913.
was it.
Mm-hmm.
When Romases lived there, they had a Grandma Romas
Yes.
that she wore this long skirt and was out in the garden all the time. She was from the old country.
And when they left, they took their clothes and left everything else. And there was treasures in there. You guys, downstairs was a train set that you wouldn't believe.
Do you still have it?
No.
No.
It's gone. The erector set's gone out of there. The chemistry set is gone.
Did you sell it or did it just get?
My mom sold it at a rummage sale because she got like $2 for it. Look at this. I got a good
Yes,
deal for this. I sold it. Saved money. Thanks, Mom.
The
Anyway,
old,
when Romases were living there one time, Jerry Kincaid,
Yeah.
Doc Kincaid's oldest boy, and I were the same age.
He lived where Kovac lives
And we
now.
were roaming the block, and we went by their back door.
You had to go up a step to go by their back door, but we did. And we looked in, nobody was home. And there was this cake sitting on the table, all frosted, a layered cake. We went in and licked all the frosting off and then left.
how
So
old
like
were
I
you?
say, you're not recording this.
I am recording. How old are you? How old were you then?
He is
I
recording.
don't know, probably 4,
Yeah.
5. It was chocolate frosting. I remember that. It was so good. We just took our fingers and,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't actually lick the cake per se. We used
Well,
our
if you use your
we
finger,
used our fingers.
you're still licking it.
But can you imagine what they must have thought when they came home and that
Seeing bear cake.
Oh, jeez, you
bad?
guys.
Now you know where David gets it.
Yeah. Now he's figuring it out.
I haven't told him some of these stories.
Let's wrap this one up.